All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to No Job Now What? This is going to be an interesting program today. We've got a lot of great panelists who are going to help us today. We want to thank everyone from HFTP and everyone from HSMAI for joining us today. We had we had well over 100 registrations, and people are still coming in. So we're going to go ahead and get this program started. All right. So first, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
All righty then, here we go. So, oh, whoops, sorry. Oh, this is not supposed to be the, okay, there we go. So, No Job Now What? This is part one. So we have planned a 5-part webinar series for you guys. This will be part one. The other 4 parts will be the next 4 Wednesdays in September, beginning today and then going all the way through the end of the month. So please put that on your calendar. We'll be sending out email notifications by the end of the week for next week registration. And as more details become available for the future programs, we'll send out information for that too.
Hey, Mitch,
all right,
I think we need everybody to mute themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to go over, I'll do that first before we go through the webinar agenda. If you have your, please mute everybody so we don't get any background noise. And also, if you have questions during the program, you can chat them to everyone, to the audience, or if it's something private, you can text it, you can message it to me in the chat box, and I'll ask it of the panelists anonymously. But if it's in the out in the fold for everyone to address, then we can do that at that time as well. Okay, and I'll do that out in public view. Okay, so we're talking today about the state of employment in the hospitality industry in you, and let's go ahead and begin. So our agenda today, employment status survey results. This survey was actually taken by most of the people who registered. It was a little pop-up and it asked you to take a quick survey. And I'm going to be going through the survey results in just a minute. Then we're going to introduce Nick, and he's going to talk about the state of the hospitality industry, kind of where we are and where we're headed. And then we'll go in and open it up to the panelists to answer questions that were submitted by the survey by attendees. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Our panelists today are Nick Reed, who's Chief Puzzle Solver, interesting title, and co-founder of Travel Staff. Imelda Bermudez, and she is Chief Matchmaker and co-founder at Travel Staff. We have Jody Flowers, Director of Sales and Marketing at Flowers Hotel Group. We have Eden Sleeger, who's President of Global Hospitality. And Brian Marcus, who's an executive recruiter also at Global Hospitality. And I'm Mitch Woolley, your moderator for today. So the employment status survey results, really, really interesting data. And we had quite a few submissions on this, so it's pretty accurate. The questions were what your employment status is. And if you were employed full-time within the hospitality industry, 24% of the people reported that that applied to them. 6% said they were employed full-time outside the industry. 6% said they were employed full-time within the industry. Nobody was employed part-time outside the industry. 12% had been furloughed, and a fully 42% had been permanently laid off. 9% were other, and then they kind of wrote in the comments what that status looked like. And one of them said extended leave of absence. A couple said they were task force DOSMs, but there was no work. And then there were others that say they were reduced hours. So some said they were reduced down to 3 days a week versus 4 days a week. So obviously the pay is commensurate with the amount of time that they're working. The second question on the survey was, if you're not employed full-time within the hospitality industry, what is the likelihood that you'll be returned to full-time status within 90 days? 78% of the people reported they were optimistic that they would return back to the hospitality industry within 90 days. Interesting. Question number 3, what remote meeting tech are you most comfortable with? Fully 97% said Zoom. I think that Zoom has been the go-to. Everybody who's never been tech savvy has gotten to know Zoom because of virtual happy hours and on e-learning, et cetera, et cetera. But surprisingly enough, actually GoToMeeting was a distant second. And then FaceTime, of course, most people are using FaceTime. So these are the kind of the spread of all of the different meeting tech. And then the final question, could you mute that, please? Thank you. The final question was, what specific issues would you like the panelists to address? And we got a lot of questions. There were a lot of duplicates, so we kind of eliminated those. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to kind of open this up to the panelists to address. I'm going to ask the questions one at a time. And again, these were submitted by the panelists. And then any one of the panelists, if you guys want to chime in, make sure you unmute yourself. In fact, all the panelists should unmute themselves now.
Nothing to do. He is wanting us to back up the website though. And he sent you in Slack.
I just muted Michelle. Okay. So here we go. So the first question for the panelists, and chime in if you want to address this from the start, and the rest of you can fill in when you are ready. How to position yourself to stand out amongst the unemployed population? How would you do that?
Mitch, I wonder if we should do the questions after the general.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I scrolled down the page too far. Nick, I'm going to introduce Nick Reed, and Nick's going to go through kind of the state of the hospitality industry. Nick, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, see, I didn't want to miss out.
It's okay. So sorry.
Good morning, everybody. I think you're all very well aware of what the state of the industry is. Everyone's reading the news, so let me give it to you in a nutshell. 25% of hotels are in default of their mortgage payments. And a similar thing is happening with the renters with their private residences. So the shit's going to hit the fan. There's just no way around it. There's no revenue to pay mortgages. So the buildings will continue to exist, but the ownerships will change. There are a lot of SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies that are being formed. Those are public companies that are going to take over large single companies, but the vulture funds are starting to circle. So the hotels, you know, might be deflagged. They might be repurposed, but the buildings won't go away. We know that there's going to be pressure to achieve more with less. Again, there's no money. So suddenly people are going to want you to be delivering results, but with smaller budgets. The good news for HFTP and HSMAI is that sales and marketing and revenue management are going to be key. They need sales and marketing to drive business to the hotel rooms. So the first people that are going to come back are you guys. So I'm glad to see that 78% are optimistic that they'll be repurposed or reemployed within 90 days. Those of you who are furloughed, the 12%, that's the good news. You get to go back to your jobs and pretty much at the rate that you were employed at. Those of you that were laid off that will be applying and will be working on things for you later on, expect some downward pressure. It's supply and demand. There's an oversupply of talent and few jobs. So don't count on the same salary you were getting before. It's just not going to happen. Some of the good news that came out this week, Dr. Fauci said that there's the likelihood of a vaccine by November, and he doesn't speak lightly. So this is the first time we've actually heard whispers. Arnold Donald, the CEO of Carnival Cruise Lines, also mentioned, and bear in mind, he's the CEO of a public company, so he can't go making statements that he can get in trouble for later. But he did mention that the likelihood of American cruises resuming by the end of the year is now on the cards. So we've got some good news. What do I say? 90 days, it's interesting. As of tomorrow, it's 12 weeks to Thanksgiving. So my advice is get through to Thanksgiving. By now, you should have already trimmed your expenses. You should be looking to improve your skill set, but get through to Thanksgiving. From Thanksgiving, I believe, and I'm going out on a limb here, I believe there'll be an announcement of a vaccine, and this has always been a race for a vaccine. It's not about distancing. It's not about masks. Those aren't going to return business to hotels and resorts. So, like I said, the good news, hotels will be hiring back. The bad news, they're not going to be using recruiters. So Brian and Eden and Melda and I, we're not going to be as busy as we were. What does that mean for you? It means it's going to be harder for you to stand out because we are your advocates. We take your talent and make you look wonderful. So you're going to have to do it for yourselves. So stay tuned for episode 2, 3, 4, and 5, because hopefully that's where you'll get your learning. But you're going to have to learn how to do things for yourself. It's not enough to have a resume. I'm sorry, if you're just updating your resume today, you're probably not going to get employed. If your LinkedIn doesn't have a photograph, you're not getting employed. These things are so obvious that I'm ashamed to say them. You need to do a whole lot more than that. So let's just make some assumptions. There will be help with resume writing, with LinkedIn profiles and things like that. But those are the obvious. What I do say is, what are you going to do for the next 12 weeks until Thanksgiving? And I wrote a little article recently that said, if you're sitting on the couch eating Cheetos and watching reruns of Seinfeld, you're not getting hired. If you're educating your children, if you're homeschooling, if you're looking after elderly parents, those are the questions that you need to be able to answer. If you're volunteering, and how many of you, you're all here, you're all with HSMAI or HFTP, how many of you are volunteering? That is what an employer is going to be looking for. What did you do to improve your skill set? And the key things to be studying over the next 12 weeks, digital marketing. Doesn't matter which way you look at it, that's going to be so important. If it is in your skill set, it needs to be. And Imelda will be talking about that a bit later on as to some free courses or some very economical courses that you could do and get them done over the next 12 weeks. So that's it from me. It's not good news. We're going to see the darkness before the light, but finally, for the first time, and I'm so glad it's this week, I see light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very, very much. That's very encouraging, Bob Fauci. Okay, so now we're going to get to the questions that were submitted by the attendees. We're going to go through a series of them, and if there's time.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello there.
No?
Okay. If there's time permits, after we go through some of the questions that the attendees submitted, we'll go through some of the questions that the panelists wanted to be able to address as well. But I'm going to start the first one off. So for the panelists, how do you position yourself to stand out amongst the unemployed population? Who'd like to take a stab at that?
I will.
Drop in.
How do you position yourself to stand out? It's not enough just to apply for a job anymore. The Montage in Laguna Beach was looking for a leisure sales manager. They had so many applicants, of which 80 were qualified, 80. So you're one of 80. You're now the 1%. You're no longer going to stand out. So you need to find other avenues to stand out. If you're applying, and as we know, most hotels, 90% of them want you to apply on an online portal. When you do that, you're just one of many. So you need to use your network. You need to search LinkedIn, see who's working at that hotel that you know, or who you know who knows somebody, and ask for an introduction. You need to write to the general manager. If your friend is a concierge, find out the politics. Send something in. You need to do something to stand out. Because as I said earlier, your recruiters are no longer going to be able to advocate for you. You have to advocate for yourself.
Very good. Thanks, Nick. Anyone else like to address that?
I think that makes a lot of sense. What he's saying, it's and what I would add to that is that personal contacts and personal phone calls to people within these properties makes a lot of sense. I cannot tell you how few people today are picking up the phone. Everybody thinks that sending an email and a text is good enough, but in our business, picking up the phone is key. And making that personal connection, stopping by the property if you can, shaking a hand. Well, I guess you don't do that anymore, but offering an elbow. And I think that's really the direction that will help everybody.
Very good. Anyone else like to address that?
I'm going to tip Imelda in on this.
Imelda.
As a recruiter, what Imelda does so well, and what we as a company have adopted is, we would send in resumes, but she would also create an executive summary of the candidate outside of the resume. And that is only done by spending time with the applicant and then making them human. And so she and her team talk at length, and then they put into the executive summary what is not in the resume. The resume are your qualifications. the executive summary made you human and personal. And you're
And
going
it
to have to
goes-
do that for yourself. Go ahead. Amanda.
Like Eden said, like Eden said, to pick up the phone and call, because that's why, that's going to make the difference. The fact that you actually talk to someone and tell them what's not on your resume, and be that people person to say, to remind them later, oh, I remember speaking to that person and I really liked them because of the conversation that we had on the phone.
Very,
Yeah.
very much to what Nick said. It's all at this point of the game. It's all about your personal connections and how to get in through the back door. We do the same thing whenever we present a candidate. We do a half page, because really nobody has the wherewithal to read too much more than a half a page these days, especially if you've got 80 resumes coming in for one position, of what's not on, exactly what was said, what's not on the resume. Personally, what's the connection for you to this potential employer? What would be interesting about you that's not on your resume that would resonate with this employer to say, hey, yeah, let's call her in, let's call him in for at least for an interview. Let's get him on the phone. I think that makes a huge, what Imelda had just said, it makes a huge difference to do that half page intro. And it's not really a cover letter. It's different from a cover letter in the fact that it's personally why you. I think that makes a big difference, and that will help you stand out, at least on paper.
Great point.
So now that you're all going to do that and you're all going to stand out for the same job, you're in trouble. You're going to have to think about that.
Well, thankfully, Nick, not everyone will probably take you up on that. So there'll be maybe some winners and maybe some losers. But at least what do they call it about the herd? You thin the herd a little bit when people don't take the advice. All right. So the next question.
A candidate who'd been a tennis pro. He was now a hotel salesperson, but he'd worked in through athletics and then into sales. And he was applying for a job with Cobb Med, and to stand out, we had him send a sleeve of tennis balls. So, what are your balls?
All right, thank you. Next question. Aside from figuring out Zoom and web meetings as a group salesperson to be successful, what new skills will we need in the new normal?
Like I said, digital marketing, because it's cheaper and the results can be measured. So everybody should be looking at what their skill set is there. And then, as Eden said, old school. It's contacts, it's the telephone. Everybody can email. How many emails do you get a day? I get about 200. So think about your old skills. Most of us, I'm looking at everyone's picture, been around for a little while when we were allowed to hug and kiss and talk. And I'm all for what Eden said. It's not enough to text.
I think digital marketing is great, and personal contacts are great, but you have to. The skills that we need to learn is we need to realize that the world is changing, not quickly, but extremely quickly, and it seems that it is accelerating. So the skills that we have today may not be worth anything tomorrow, or may only be less important tomorrow than they are today. And I think that being flexible, learning to be flexible, being creative, see the world around you, and try to take advantage of opportunities as you perceive them, because things are changing. Maybe there's a skill that you can offer to fit in someplace in the technology that we know nothing about today. 5 years ago, nobody heard of Tesla. Today, the company is just going crazy. So we have technologies, artificial intelligence, we have changes that are occurring very quickly today that were not even thought of 5 years ago. What were you thinking in January this year before all this came up? We don't know what's going to happen in December. We can all say, hey, this is going to be a turnaround in the industry, but we may have another black swan event coming up in December. We just don't know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I gotta tell you something, you know, everything's online. So everybody's applying online where you just look like everybody else. RFPs are answered online and you just look like everybody else. So people really, really have to get creative. Like when you go and you knock on the front door and they're like, oh, nobody's home, and you leave. I wouldn't leave. I go to the side window and peek in and knock. If nobody comes in there, I take a chainsaw to the back door. You really have to get creative. You know, I can tell you that one time that Sandra, when she was doing sales, Sandra literally went out and bought a pair of shoes. She took one woman's shoe and put it in a box and sent it to a prospect and said, I want to meet with you. And then she set this little plastic chair she mailed to him, and it said, let's sit down for a cup of coffee. And she went in to see this guy months and months later, and he had the thing on his desk and couldn't figure out what to do with it because it only had one woman's shoe in it. I mean, you got to be creative. You got to do something. That's why I say you got to go through the back door and take a chainsaw, because everybody's trying to go through the front door. So
Hey,
you got to
Nick.
do something different. Yes.
Nick, I have to add something.
Yeah,
And I
sure.
knew- Yeah, okay, good. And I lost you guys for a couple of minutes with a lot of Zoom going on here. But something that we don't talk enough in our profession, and you could be creative and read and network, but I think to also, because we're in these difficult times right now, everyone, whether you're employed or not, I think now is also the time to become financially sound and look at your opportunities in the future. Not only what kind of money you're looking at earning, but also your savings and investments in your future retirement. So if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, or even 60 or 70, everyone's on a different pay scale and everyone's on a different level where they need to go in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So I think other than being creative and out of the box, but I think if you build your foundation now, because this is the chance and the opportunity for you to reflect and look forward to in the future, because we're going to be entering in 2021, 22, 23, and then the 2030s eventually, everyone in our industry needs to look at where we're all going financially, individually. So when you walk into that interview or that networking environment, you kind of know what you want and where you're going, because everyone's been shaken to the core. Even if you're employed or not employed, or if you're furloughed or not, now is the time to look at where you want to go financially. And that's going to really show where you want to go, presently, between now and the holidays, and then into 2021. And I think that's an important message, because no one, other than your mentors, your family, or your husband or partner, is going to, look at you and tell you, okay, what money do you have to earn? And then that's what you should look at. So if you want to stay within the society of our industry, or stay, or look out, but there's a lot of economies going on outside of our own industry. And I think that's an important message. So financially, look at your foundation, and then also look at your future, because hospitality people, we are resilient and we're opportunists. And I think now's also the time to look at what we could do inside and outside, but none of that matters unless you know where you're going financially.
Very well said.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thank
Jody.
you. Thanks.
All right. Okay, so next question. Which skills should we acquire to be more marketable in the job market once the economy rebounds? Which skills?
Get your hair done.
Digital.
I say this with pride. The reason I say that, and it's not skill, somebody else can address that, is we didn't talk about putting your photograph on LinkedIn. We did on LinkedIn, but resumes. I'm a firm believer on photographs. And as Brian mentioned, in that half-page personal summary, the applications with photographs get recognized quicker than those without. But as to the rest of the question, I'll leave it to somebody else, Mitch.
Okay. Anyone else like to address that?
Maybe you need to repeat the question.
Yeah. Jody, you want me to repeat that?
I said Excel. I I know it's so silly, but you know, if you become a master of Excel, then you have a job.
Or even
Yeah.
technology, don't be afraid of technology. So many people are, oh, I don't know how to use Zoom, or oh, I don't know how to. There's classes out there, even courses that you can take. And I think because we work in such a technology driven world nowadays, I'd say brush up on your technology.
For sure.
Try
I
I
learning.
would add revenue management. I know that we have HFTP here, but HSMA has been flirting with revenue management for a while, and the crossover is changing. As you know, revenue management used to report to sales. Directors of sales had that in their team. Now, directors of revenue management have a seat at the executive table. So there are courses that can be done that are offered through the various schools. Again, we'll be posting some of those, but for traditional salespeople, look at revenue management. You have to look at what you're selling, what you're getting in return for what you're selling.
Mitch, what's
Yeah.
the question again? What was the question?
Question is how to get other, what skills do you need to acquire to be more marketable in the job market once the economy rebounds?
Oh, I want to add flexibility. I mean, I think everyone knows that, but that should be top of mind. Flexibility, adaptability, and willing to work out of the box. And this sounds kind of silly, but because we're all people persons and persons that are people, all of us may have learned, disconnected enough not to learn how to work with other people. So whatever way you can continue to work with other people in this environment, I think that's an important skill set. I'm not saying that people have, but there is a sensibility of loss of working, and not just working and earning an income, but talking to other people, learning from other people, having a general attitude with other people, learning to forget simple levels of etiquette, the pleases and thank yous. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but we've all been sequestered inside of our homes more than others, and others may not, but just the general, sense of hospitality. And I think that's an important skill. So I said flexibility and adaptability, but also that comes with the level of professionalism that we should still hope to maintain, within the pandemic and outside of the pandemic. It's interesting because we're in this pandemic. 7 months ago, who would have thought? But now here we are. And, events have been canceled, conventions have been canceled, networks have been canceled, and now we're interacting on Zoom. And it's a phenomenal landscape. But we're learning, we're disconnecting from our neighbors, community, from, the responders. And so we have to force ourselves to go back out. And I think it's an important exercise to continue to work with other people in the physical sense, whether it's at the grocery store or at a Target or wherever. And I think that will help us all launch out and become successful again. But if we continue to stay inside, we will not survive. We won't. And I think that's also, and that's part of flexibility, adaptability, and taking the opportunities of working with other people and maintaining that level of hospitality, which is what we're all known for.
Michelle actually tapped on something that's also something that everybody should be working on in conjunction with everybody else. And it goes back to doing that half page. It's going back to making sure your resume is as best as it can be. Everything you do and everything you put forward is part of your own personal brand. And if you're not working on your brand, then you're somewhat behind the eight ball, because that's what's going to make a huge difference in getting noticed and getting through and breaking through all the airwaves, is working on that personal brand.
Hey, Brian, Mary Beth had a really, really good point when you were speaking about putting the photograph on the resume. That's a really great idea. And Mary Beth says, what are the concerns about older workers when a photograph's on the resume or LinkedIn? theoretically we have experience on our side. What would you maybe
You know,
highlight the
I'm-
reason that the actual skills that you have as a result of
You
being
have
over?
to work on, yeah, you have to work on your brand. But look, employers are not stupid. They can add. If you finished high school in 1974, they know that you're 64. Come on. So the photograph makes you personal. And you're quite right, Mitch. You need to do something to talk about what your skill set is. Is there ageism? Of course there is. Is it going to continue? Of course it is. But they're going to figure it out anyway. So don't be shy. Don't be scared. Put it out there. Help them to look for it and then sell yourself. And for the DOSs that are watching today, if you're able to leave the country for a while, go to Asia. You know, it's where you're expert and it's where age is not as a hindrance. So, there are alternatives. Coming back, suddenly your Asian experience will hold you in good stead.
Great. Super.
Yeah, in fact, America is one of the few countries that don't actually require or as a social norm have photographs on a resume, regardless of what your age is.
Well, I think you don't actually have to put it on the resume. If you put it on LinkedIn, of course, is important. And believe me that employers, if they're interested in your background, they're going to go straight to LinkedIn. And if your LinkedIn profile doesn't match up with your resume, they're going to figure that out too. So put your photo on LinkedIn, because if you don't, they're going to wonder why. So if you got your pet dog there, or you have your parakeets picture there, that's not going to do much good, you know.
Unless they're a bird lover.
Mitch says they can figure it out. So if
right.
you have to put an old photo up there, you know.
Or a current one.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So, how to get other industries to understand the importance of hiring hospitality people, and how much strengths and skills and leadership that we bring to the table.
That's actually really interesting. I don't know if anybody in this room ever envisioned themselves working for an investment company or working for a law office or working for a senior living facility, but those are just some of the recent searches that we've done, that these industries from outside of hospitality are specifically knocking on our door to find hospitality leadership for these types of companies, whether that is on the sales aspect of things, on the operations aspect of things. So I think slowly, you know, things are changing, especially now with COVID and having so many hospitality professionals out of work, that I think this is only going to become more popular, that these other types of industries are noticing and can equate a value to what us as hospitality professionals can bring to the table. And to me, I think this is something really exciting and really interesting that's going on in the industry. So I think it is out there.
Yeah.
Do you have statistics on companies or industries hiring hospitality industry fellows? Brian, I'm just asking.
I don't have statistics. This is really going by the inquiries that we have coming in through our company, and you know, and we're starting to get more and more of them. You know, percentage wise, it's still a small percent, because we, at the end of the day, we specialize in hospitality. It also takes a very, you know, open-minded senior executive at a law firm to say, gee, you know what, we want to have the best, and we want to create the best customer experience and client experience possible. Let's go find somebody from a 5-star, 5-diamond luxury resort, because they understand this. They can bring that experience to our clients. We're seeing it as well in a lot of financial industries, and banking are really saying, okay, well, at the end of the day, what's going to separate us from our competitors, other than we're the best lawyers in Beverly Hills or in New York? What's gonna have us stand out from the crowd as well? So I think that's something that's really interesting that's happening in the industry. The other aspect to look at is private clubs. that's a fairly easy pivot for hospitality going into private clubs. And we do probably about 50% private clubs and 50% your traditional hotels hospitality within our company. And it's it's a great jump off point into going into a private club. And private clubs have not sustained the damage that hotels have sustained throughout this pandemic. The statistics are much different for those that have been made redundant in a private club than in a hotel. They've pretty much, 90% of private club managers still have their jobs and are still working, maybe a little bit less hours. So that's another field to look at. As a DOSM or as a catering director, that can pivot, or even certainly in finance, that can lend itself beautifully into a private club environment.
Good point. There's actually a couple of quick things I'd like to share. So there was this guy, he had a BS in engineering and a PhD in biomedical engineering. And of course, he got laid off and he didn't know what to do. He actually got hired by ESPN as a data analyst because he was so highly analytical. So you get someone coming from engineering and going to that. There's another kid that was at City Club, which is in our hospitality and private club, and he was director of member relations, a really, really people person, and he went across the street to Paul Hastings building and joined Northwestern Mutual as a financial advisor. But again, he had those people skills, really, really good soft people skills that he could transfer over, and they really welcomed him because typically someone who's analytical may not be really, really that aggressive and outgoing like that, but someone in hospitality is. So there's lots of skills that are transferable.
Have we covered looking at earning extra credentials or going back to school and getting, a degree or a post-grad degree? Have we covered that yet?
No.
Okay. I don't know if that's within this whole, but this would be a good time, other than looking at what you want to do within or without. But I don't know if we want to talk about that or not, but it goes along with what Brian is saying and what you're saying, Mitch, to walk across the street to Paul Hastings and giving that resume, people are going to look at that top line or that bottom line saying, where you went to school or what extra credentials you have. And that's going to really stand out and pop off the page.
And sadly, without recruiters to advocate, there was a movement where education was not becoming as important. It was, people weren't being looked at if they didn't have a BA. Then it was starting to shift, and now it's going to go back because you're going to have people, and I'm sorry, recruitment is not HR. It's very different, and you're going to have people looking at it, and they're not going to be able to do anything. They're going to look at a page, and they're just going to put in the bin everything that doesn't have a degree. So they're just going to draw a line. So we're going to go right back to where we were trying to get out of.
Well, if I can make a plug, in in California, our community colleges are free if you do go full-time for 2 years. And you could work and go full-time at our community colleges in California. All you have to do is just pay for your books.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And then this is something that's really cool in California. You are guaranteed a spot at a UC after going to a community college in California. So your junior and senior year could finish off at a UC.
Got it.
Yeah. So, there are options. You could do credentials. You could extend your degree. You get your MBA, whatever you want to do. But it goes along with what Nick is saying. And it's how you're going to stand, separate from your peers and your competitors. And I know everyone knows that, but you have to hear this again, and we have to remind ourselves.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so there was actually an interesting question on LinkedIn, but it got very, very technical about how to kind of position yourself so the search engines would pick it up and things. And I think we'll table that question, the answer to that question until September 16th, which is our third session, where we'll have actually LinkedIn, and we'll go into kind of depth on how to optimize your profile, how to set it up properly, how to optimize it and make you basically in the best light. The next question is advice for those now in the job market who are in their 50s or 60s and were close to retirement.
Keep working.
No, I was going to say the opposite, which is if you're that close, go for it. Friends of mine who turned 65 who got their Medicare are laughing, and they avoided this
That's true.
pandemic by timing. But no, we're in this business because we love the business. I mean, if you want to earn a whole lot more money, do something else. But if you love the business, then you're going to stay in it. And I don't think 50 is a cutoff period anymore. Ageism really is starting at 60. So if you're the lucky 50, think of yourself as young and go for it.
Good advice. Good advice. Next question. Should we anticipate salary adjustments for mid and upper management?
Again, if you're furloughed, the laws are there to protect you. If you're laid off, then yes.
So let's go back to what Nick said. Nick, it's important for the 60-year-olds because we're, you know, in a blink of an eye, we're all going to be there one day, and that's still, and you know, a group. You know, I want to make sure, because you said 50, yeah, but you didn't address the 60 and the 70-year-olds, because I know there's 60 and 70-year-olds that are working full time. So it's just important to note that in our industry, you could continue to work when you're 60 and 70, right?
You can, but let's address it realistically. You are your age, and you might look a little bit younger, you might look a little bit older, but there is ageism, and people are not as quick to hire a 60-year-old. And it's that old, I don't know how long they'll stick around nonsense. Necessity dictates that people will stick around, but employers have that choice, and there's not a whole lot you can do. And then it goes back to what Imelda and Brian and Eden were saying. You have to make yourself stand out. Once they're talking to a person, the age starts to diminish. But as long as it's just on your resume, and yes, they're not allowed to ask, but they're figuring it out. And as Eden said, as soon as they're interested, they're looking you up on LinkedIn, and and everyone's become clever. They're dropping the last 10 jobs and only showing their last 5. They're dropping their graduation date and things like that. But ultimately, you can't sue somebody if they don't actively use ageism. But everybody has a bias. It's just natural. So you have to do something. But to say that it's not problematic, I can't say that. It is.
Okay. All right.
I'm a victim of that. I was born in 56, and I started, unlike Eden, who's the godfather and grandfather of this business. I started this business with Imelda 3 years ago. So I turned 60 and I did this, and I haven't had this much fun. But if I weren't self-employed, it would be that much harder for me to get a job. I know that.
So before we go back to the next question, I just want to add, and Nick and Imelda, you could speak to this about starting your own business at 60, but that could be later in another seminar. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I think there's a lot of people in the audience that are probably thinking, not even 60, but 50, 40, 30 in the 20s about what they could do in the future and how to start a business.
We can absolutely cover that. I'm doing it for MPI. We've got a series of seminars or webinars that are for various chapters to plug and play. And one of those is it worth starting your own business? Should you pivot? Should you reskill? But you're absolutely right. And we can cover that. And no, Imelda is not that old. She is much younger than me.
But incidentally, to that response, there's actually in a webinar number 5, which is the last in the series, which is on Wednesday the 30th, we'll actually address leaving the industry. And during that call, that webinar, we can address that, whether you're going to start your own business or whether you're going to move aside to another basically a career in another industry. So Michelle, she's giving us all kind of stuff. Topgolf's hiring a hospitality account manager right now in Las Vegas. The first 10 people who've updated their resume and put their picture on LinkedIn win. Just kidding. Okay. There's a whole bunch of jobs that are outside that are still in the restaurant business, still in hospitality, just outside of hotels. Lots of availability.
And I think that goes back to flexibility. I mean, there are jobs out there, you know, and for those that really do need to work, you know, if you can make that adjustment, you know, psychologically, you know, as Michelle was just putting up, you know, there's a bunch of stuff out there, and it's just finding it and then cutting through the noise and getting to be noticed. But there definitely are positions out there.
Yeah, I think, Brian, you're right. And if I see one more thing on LinkedIn that says, if we ever came across each other and I can help you, you know, send me a message, and that green, I'm looking for work. No one's looking at those things. What Michelle's doing right now is what everybody should be doing. They should be helping each other. And if you're not helping each other, you're not going to get noticed. If you do, it might take a while for it to come around, but it will come around. So, yeah, be nice, be human, be cooperative.
You're absolutely right. And you know what? No one's saying or advocating that you leave the business, but depending on the financial situation and you love the hospitality industry, you have to do what you have to do. But when things come back in 2 or 3 years, this will be a blip in the road. We won't even know that anything happened. And you come on back and you'll be welcome back with open arms, because there will be a lot of need for hospitality professionals. I've got a couple more questions we got to get through. And actually, I think we're going to open this up to the attendees. So if you want to respond and kind of share your experience or share what's going on with you, make sure you unmute yourself before you start talking. Anyone want to say what they've been doing to advance themselves professionally? Anybody want to share? We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Mitch. It's Sandra.
Hey.
HSMAI director or managing director. One of the things that I've done during this COVID time has been to learn coding, and also social media. I've also taken a couple of classes. I took one class from Harvard because they're free. I've joined a couple of chambers of commerce because they're free to join right now. And I've actually gotten a lot of business. As a matter of fact, I'm happy to report Aflac is hiring. So if you guys are interested in working for the Duck, he does pay well. So please reach out. And I love the hospitality, and thank you, panel. You guys are awesome. And Michelle, you are the best.
Thank you.
She's the best.
Hi, you guys. I'm glad you guys put this on. This is really a great opportunity to help a lot of people out there that are really trying to figure everything out. And I just like to say, like, I've been reaching out via social media to 20 people a day since this happened in March, and trying to help them, kind of let them know we're all in this together. And you know, I feel kind of isolated at times for this. And so nobody's alone in this whole thing. But I do think a lot of the feedback and stuff I've heard have been, a lot of people have been cross of like angry or depressed and really discouraged with the whole thing. And I feel like when you have that mindset, it carries with you into your daily life. And so when you are trying to find a job or trying to sell yourself, it comes across differently than I think what you're wanting to come across as. So I just think it's really important to work on your resilience and your mindset in this time more than ever, and to reach out and count on one another. Because I can tell you, with a lot of people that I've reached out to try to help them, and talking with them and working through things with them to help them, it's also helped me. And so I just think that's really important to do regularly. So thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great.
One of the other things to look at with courses online and what have you, I think languages as an example. Duolingo is a fabulous program. Keeping yourself busy and going to your strength. If you've been in the industry and you speak 25% Spanish, learn to go to 50%. Improve the skills that you already have. If you're really good with numbers, learn more about numbers. Don't try to go to sales. And if you're in sales, improve your skills there. Go to your strength and, you know, improve what you already have built up in your career, because that's really what's going to take you to the next level.
Does anyone else want to share, say how they've already reached outside the industry to their network of colleagues, friends, or family? Anyone want to share any experience with that? How you've kind of reached outside the industry?
This is Michelle Carlin from Alignment Advising.
Hello.
Hi. So I'm a 25-year veteran in the CVB world, and I recently started my own business last year. And one of the reasons for that was to help folks who are in career transition. So I actually offer coaching services. One of the things that I've been doing is volunteering my time to help give consultations to people who are furloughed or out of work, just to give them a boost. And I find that people just need to be heard about what happened to them, talk about why it happened, and brainstorm some ideas as to what they can do next in their career if they choose to move forward with hospitality or they want to look at other industries. I help them with that. So I am offering an hour free consultation to anyone on this call. I'll put my email in the chat box. But I think it's hugely important to join other networking groups outside of the industry. And one that I joined was the Women Business Owner Group. So there's plenty of associations out there. It's just talking to some people and getting some ideas. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Great.
And Mitch, I'm going to add one more thing is I know you guys are going to be covering LinkedIn.
Yes.
But one of the things that's been very helpful for a lot of people that I've been helping transition is using LinkedIn segmenting. And so you can really segment down a lot into areas that you're, so cross-references. So you're in a director of sales position at a hotel. You can narrow down in LinkedIn other director positions that correlate directly with that, and it'll open up all sorts of opportunities for all of you to consider because all of your skills are transferable. So you can use LinkedIn as a resource for that. It's fantastic.
Thank you. All right, let's see what else we got. Next question. I think we've got time for one more. Let's think about this. How about that?
Can I add something?
Sure.
Okay, good. I think it's important because it just goes back to our foundation as humans to just do the basics. Walk in your neighborhood, go meet, whether you live in a large community or a small community, take your daily walks and meet your neighbors or your business community owners or baristas. And that will open up a lot within your mindset and connecting with other people, as well as getting daily exercise. So, getting your house in order, but also if you live in an apartment or a neighborhood or a condo or wherever you live. But I think it's important to walk outside and meet your neighbor because there's a commonality within that community, and you'll meet people and you'll network naturally, and you'll see what happens and where that will lead to. And if you make that a habit, then you'll see the same people and different people and new people. And that's just an instant free network. That's it.
All right. So I have one final question, and we have 2 minutes left to do that, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Anyone want to answer this? How long are you willing to wait for the industry to bounce back?
That's a personal question. How long can you afford to wait? I think it's that simple.
I think you have to look at the industry as a whole because, the way I'm reading it is the city hotels, as an example, and the convention type properties are going to take a lot longer to come back than the luxury 90-room, super expensive hotel that can, clean the place up, ceiling to floor on a daily basis and provide the service and has people who can afford that. So you have different layers within this industry, and some are worth waiting for. Some might be 2 years. And I think you have to assess that based on what your specialty is.
Great. Anyone else?
Hi there, I'm Cynthia Pipes. the wife of a hotelier who's been running hotels since 1979. And all of a sudden, he doesn't have any hotel business to look forward to. But he, like Michelle said, he hasn't sort of merged into the background and gotten kind of desperate and morose about it. So for those who have a little capital, nest egg, I would advise that you use it and invest in something that you might get excited about. For instance, my husband now at 65 is investing in chocolates. He's partnered with a chocolatier, and then he started another little business that is catering school lunches. And then he has a third little business, and he's partnered with a Spaniard to create wonderful hotel environments in renovation situations, which is not very lucrative right now, but going forward, he is very hopeful that it's going to take off. So he's very excited. I've never seen this side of him. I've been with him 47 years, and he's really spreading his wings, going off in every direction that is possible. And it's very exciting. So I think what Michelle said is extremely important. We should try not to sort of fade away into the doldrums and get psychologically disrupted by this pandemic, and lift ourselves up and do the best that we can. And I think it'll all pay off. In our particular situation, it has. And so I thought, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Cynthia.
That's good.
You're very
Well,
welcome.
ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to bid a farewell. First of all, I wanted to thank all of our panelists for their gracious time. We had a number of, I think, 3 calls for the webinar prep to prepare for this today. And some of our panelists are going to be joining us in future episodes. Again, this is a 5-part webinar series, sponsored, of course, by HSMAI and HFTP. Part 2 will be next Wednesday, the 9th, same time. As all of the webinars will be on Wednesdays from 11 to 12. The one next Wednesday is called Resumes, Interviews, and Zoom, how to ace the hiring process. So it's going to be really a lot of fun. So we hope that you guys will join us for that. Again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to HSMAI. Thank you to HFTP. And thank you all for your giving us your time today. We hope you found it useful and beneficial. And we look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be sending out notifications within the next day or 2 with a link to register for the next webinar.
And a
I
quick
did do a
shout
little-
out to Sandra Martinez. This was her idea, and
That's
we're all
right.
here because of her. So thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All right,
you
guys.
very much.
Take care.